Some residents have recently asked questions about Frankfort police policies, hiring practices, and training. Many of the questions originated from a town hall meeting with former President Obama in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing. With me today is Trustee Keith Ogle, Chair of our Land Use and Policy Committee, Commissioner Deidre Stokes of the Frankfort Police Commission, and John Burica, our Police Chief. Before we get into some questions and answers, I will make a comment about suggestions to defund police. I believe some people mean that police departments are so problematic that they should be replaced with something else, whether that be more social service programs or some other type of police, or even both. Other people seem to mean that some of the funds that now go to police should go for social service programs instead. I hope that after listening to this program, our residents will agree that they are getting good value from the Frankfort Police Department. If they don't, I and our police chief are always ready to hear their views and better understand different perspectives. So, Trustee Ogle, over the years, your committee has regularly reviewed and updated police policies. How about asking our police chief and police commissioner to describe some of these policies and procedures?
Thank you, Mayor, for inviting me to this program. Yes, we have received a lot of questions from the public about police procedures, and we will answer them in this program. When you have a problem and you dial 911, we count on the police showing up. To begin with, Chief, what is the basic purpose of the police department, and from where do our policies originate?
Frankfort's police department exists to serve and protect residents and businesses as well as visitors of Frankfort, not only from the property and criminal activity, but for things such as domestic squabbles, medical problems, natural disasters. For instance, since our police are constantly on patrol, when there's a call from any kind of emergency, the police are often the first ones on scene. They carry AED defibrillators and Maxilone in every car. They're trained in CPR, first aid. Our procedures and policies come from state and federal laws, general best practices, and court rulings. The Frankfort Police subscribe to a nationally recognized management policy development organization that analyzes the above criteria and continually develops new policies that will protect the officers, the municipality, and the individual. These policies are updated every 6 months.
Chief, let's go through a series of the most commonly asked questions. First, are officers required to de-escalate situations?
All of our officers receive de-escalation and mental health training. The training is designed to give officers the tools to allow them to evaluate a situation and use techniques to calm the situation when possible. De-escalation training is continuous and multifaceted to cover a wide range of scenarios that officers could face. Our officers try to get voluntary compliance first.
Are officers prohibited from using maneuvers that cut off oxygen or blood flow, including chokeholds or carotid restraints?
These types of force can be deadly and are not to be used merely to restrain a suspect.
Are officers required to intervene and stop excessive or unnecessary force used by other officers and then report these incidents immediately to a supervisor?
Yes, this is and has been clearly stated in our policy. Officers learn the importance of this while attending the police academy. Upon academy graduation, our officers are put through rigorous and tedious field training programs where this is again reinforced. Officers continue to receive training on this and many other topics every year. Officers know that they will be supported if they report an unlawful act. Each officer knows that they will have the responsibility to provide safety to all and the duty to intercede if they see anyone acting inappropriately, regardless of rank, including myself.
We see on TV and the movies all sorts of car chases and shooting. Are our officers restricted from shooting at moving vehicles?
Shots fired at or from a moving vehicle are rarely effective. Officers are trained that they should move out of the path of an approaching vehicle whenever possible.
Are there limits to the types of force and/or weapons that can be used to respond to specific types of resistance and specific characteristics such as age, size, and disability?
In each situation, the actions of the person dictate the tactics and the tools that are used. This decision comes from regular and ongoing training and the proper use of force. In all situations, officers will begin by attempting to gain voluntary compliance or using de-escalation techniques. Dealing with emotionally charged people in situations such as domestic issues often requires skills to separate and calm the parties involved. Officers also rely on their training to deal with people who have mental issues or may be unstable or people who need special care. We integrate this into our training at every level, from batons to pepper spray and tasers to firearms. Use of force is not static. Officers are trained to use a minimal level of force that is reasonably to effect arrests. I'd like to remind people that the vast amount of contacts with the public, even arrest situations, officers typically get voluntary compliance.
Are officers required to exhaust all other reasonable means before resorting to deadly force?
This is not only policy, this is the law. In fact, most officers will go through their entire career without firing their firearms except for training.
Are officers required to give a verbal warning before using serious force, such as shooting, tasing, or pepper spraying someone?
Officers are trained that when reasonable, a verbal warning and an opportunity to comply should precede the use of these devices.
Are officers required to report each time they use force or threaten to use force?
All use of force is reported as soon as possible to the supervisor, and a written report is mandatory for any use of force incident.
Commissioner Stokes, can you tell us something about the hiring process and what a new officer can expect?
Thanks for inviting me to participate. First, let me tell you about the role of the Police Commission. State law dictates that the 3 Frankfort Police Commissioners are responsible for hiring and disciplining Frankfort police officers. We are civilian residents of Frankfort who are appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the trustees. The hiring process begins with an advertisement for our eligibility list. State law requires we have a valid hiring list for any vacancies that exist or may become available. A written test is scheduled. At our last test, out of the 64 people who took the test, 11 failed to meet the minimum standard. These test results are scored and the Police Commission conducts oral interviews, creating more scores. All scores are then tallied and a numerical list is created. The police department must then hire in the order of the list to fill any vacancies. This process for the hiring of officers is regulated by state law.
Does that end the hiring process?
No. When a vacancy or job opening exists, the department initiates an extensive background check, including a neighborhood canvass and polygraph exam. If the recruit makes it through this process, which can take from 6 to 10 weeks, they are given a conditional offer of employment by the Police Commission.
So is that now the end of the hiring process?
No. Next, they must pass a psychological and medical exam. If the candidate passes all of these criteria, he or she must attend a 14-week state-approved police academy. After successfully completing the academy and with a passing score on the state exam, the recruit becomes a probationary police officer. He or she will ride with one of our training officers for at least another 12 weeks before being allowed to patrol on his or her own. Once on his or her own, the officer will then rotate into our regular, ongoing training program that all officers must complete.
Thank you, Commissioner Stokes. So, Chief, do all officers then pass this process?
No. In some cases, even with all these precautions, officers sometimes do not pass the state academy or they don't make it through field training program. All of these processes are designed to make sure we are getting the best officer possible for our community. Even after all the basic training, our officers are regularly evaluated and reviewed by their sergeants and command staff.
And Chief, here's my final question, and it is a series of linked questions. Do our police have quotas for traffic tickets? Do we reward officers for making arrests? Do we reward officers for issuing traffic tickets? Is there pressure on the police force to issue traffic tickets or make arrests? And do any elected officials ask that the police be used as a revenue source?
The answers there are no, 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 and no. In Frankfort, our police are here to serve and protect. There is no pressure on us to write a certain number of tickets or to produce revenue from these citations. It is against the law to set ticket quotas. We do not reward officers for arrests or citations. We do require our police to have contact with our residents, motorists, and businesses each shift. But these contacts can be social, complimentary, community policing, or they may be a warning or a citation. The mayor has made it clear that we are not to be a revenue source and that we are to use our best judgment when a warning is appropriate or a citation should be issued.
Thank you, Chief. You've answered the most common questions asked by our residents. I hope that our residents are reassured to hear that our police are already following proper procedures in Frankfort. So, Mayor, I hope that this discussion will help our residents understand that in Frankfort, our police work hard to operate not only within the law, but also using best practices for police.
That's right, Keith. And your committee continues to adjust procedures and policies to keep up with those best practices. Commissioner Stokes, we rely on you and your counterparts to help us find the best candidates. And Chief, we rely on your department and our field training officers to keep our standards high. In conclusion, I once again call on our residents to cooperate with our police. They go to great lengths to serve and protect you. On behalf of the police department, I want to remind you, please lock your car doors. Do not leave the keys or key fobs in the car. Get to know your police officers by joining our police at community policing events such as Coffee with a Cop, National Night Out, and invite police officers to your neighborhood meetings, civic events, and church events. Get to know them. Above all, if you see or hear something suspicious, call 911. Thanks for listening.